Hello, Lois Lowry. What a pleasure to have you back for another reasonably spontaneous conversation.
Okay. And it always is with you, reasonably spontaneous and always fun. And it's nice to be back.
Thank you. Today, we're going to go back over your latest book. And so this is our opportunity to to talk about Tree Table Book.
Odd
And
title.
I know, and so I want to know the genesis of this book because this is a book where I was so charmed by it because this wonderful story of two best friends who happen to be 77 years apart in age. One is 11 and who is Sophie, and they're both named Sophie. So tell me the genesis of this book when you were thinking about writing it.
Yeah. Good question. And I always have a little difficulty answering that question about any of
Mhm.
my books, trying to remember what triggered something. And this, of course, this was published this past spring, but I had started it several years ago. So it's
Yeah,
even harder to go back that far. But I'm guessing that one of the triggers for this book is the fact that I'm getting old. And in fact, you and I are talking in February, and my birthday's in March. And next
yeah,
month, I will be 88, which is the same age as the Sophie in the book. However,
exactly.
when I wrote it, it was probably 4 years ago, so I wasn't quite that old. But I realized looking back at some of the many, many books I've written that so many of them involve a relationship, if not a close friendship, between an old person and a child, including my very first book, which was called A Summer to Die and published in 1977, a zillion years ago. Well, let me think, 48 years ago,
Yeah.
actually, and was somewhat autobiographical. And it's the story told from the point of view of a 13-year-old girl about the death and the effect on the whole family of her older sister. And in that, my older sister had died when we were both young. So it derived from that. But in that book, and this was not true in my real life, the child, the 13-year-old, derives a great deal of comfort during the ongoing tough circumstances, which of course have taken her parents' attention,
Yes.
from an old man, widowed old man who lives alone in a house down the road. And I used the man as a vehicle in the book. That sounds dispassionate, and it isn't, of course.
Of
But the
course not.
child needed someone like that, and so I created him. I think we all need someone like that, and children in particular, and children who are going through tough times. And so, in creating this child, I
Mhm.
created her 88-year-old friend.
It was wonderful. But the thing I love when I start a book or I start a TV series, I'm always interested on how long it takes me to go from zero to caring.
Oh, interesting.
And I began to care about 11-year-old Sophie right away. What an absolute, I mean, she had her own personality, her own she had her own
Mm-hmm.
mind as to what she thought the world was like, and she had this this wonderful attitude about life, and her best friend Ralphie across the street, and Oliver, the and you brought in an autistic child. So I'm looking at it from from the the idea of introducing two people, and I take children and young adults as people, introducing them and opening up channels of compassion for autism, for someone who is so different, which is Sophie, the 11-year-old character. She's so different, yet she is completely ready to step out into the world and learn about it and make mistakes and learn and correct. And it was just, it was stunning. This character Sophie is just, did you model her on?
I think that's an interesting question to me. Many years ago, I wrote a series about it. There were 7 books all told, I think, in that series, and the character's name is in each title, and her name was Anastasia Krupnik. And as you were talking, I was thinking Sophie, of course, but I was also going back and thinking she's just like Anastasia was. Different circumstances, different parents, but that same kind of, I don't know how to describe it, and you described it quite well, but clear thinking and individualistic and sardonic and funny, though she doesn't intend to be funny. So, at any rate, now I've forgotten your question, and that's
Well,
something
now, well,
often.
what I would just exploring these characters, because
Oh,
her
okay.
friendship and this
Yeah,
tribe of 3 that she has, is they're
yeah,
trying to attempt to deal with Sophie as she is going through dementia, as she
yeah,
beginning and going into the process of dementia. And this is a wonderful way of exploring of Sophie exploring, and also her
yeah,
digging into
yeah,
how can we still get the long term memories, even though the short-term memories are not something that we're able to absorb. Now,
yeah.
you went through this with your father when he was going through Alzheimer's, correct?
Well, my father didn't have Alzheimer's as a diagnosis, but he was old in his 90s, and his memory was slipping.
Sure.
And so I didn't see him often because we lived in 2 different states. So I'd fly to visit him every couple months. And each time I would see him, it would, it will have slipped a little more. But to be honest, it's something that every family
Every
undergoes at
family goes
some
through.
point. And,
Sure.
and so it's something that every child, if they're not now aware of it, will become so. And this is a child who is being personally affected by it through her friendship with this woman and of course, this being a child. And now I'm going to answer your previous question of how I came up with this particular personality.
Yeah.
She's the child I wish I had been. I was a very introverted, shy uh, child, and Sophie is not. Sophie is a take charge kind of child, and that's the
Totally.
child I wish I could have been. At any rate, so she attempts the impossible, which is to fix her friend,
Yes.
and her attempt, I think, is I can't think of the right adjective, but it's very charming.
It
Uh,
is, isn't it?
it's often funny. And I think it's important to give that element. It's not a tragic story. It's a story of human life and what happens to all of us at one point or another. And so it's a way of accepting that. She learns to accept what she can't change, but she spends an awful lot of time trying to fix it first.
Exactly. She does. I mean, she comes up with an entire plan to be able to fix it and to be able to and I love the way that she classifies people that she doesn't know until she has to learn more about them. And that's one of the things about her. She is willing to change her mind once she gets more information. And and I love the way that she is fascinated with language. She just loves to get into words and to figure out where words come from, and how they can come
Yeah.
in and dissect them and bring them up, because she's just so absolutely curious.
Yeah, that's one of her main characteristics, I guess, and that's one that I did share, because I, as a child, was a very curious child. I didn't have the wherewithal that Sophie does to go out and try to satisfy her curiosity, but I was
Yeah.
certainly a curious child, as she was, and I was one who was fascinated, as she is, with language. And one of the things she does is something that I did, and that now I'm realizing my old character of Anastasia also did. She made lists of things. In this case, she makes a list of words that she hates.
Yes.
And there are many that are justifiable. I could have added more had I had more space. But the child, Anastasia, in those previous books, each chapter ends with a list that she has made. And the first book has things I hate and things I love. And she discovers that they go back and forth. I shouldn't be talking about a book that we're not here to talk about.
But we're talking about your whole, because
Okay.
I see a writer's life. You have to you can take it at any part, because each one of the things builds upon the next. Nothing happens it doesn't happen out of sequence, and not because you could not have written this book the way you did without first doing
Yes.
Anastasia and
Yeah.
building it up on that. Is that
Yeah.
is
That's
that fair?
probably true. Yes. Yeah, now I have to think about that for a while, but not only books, but lives. I mean, it's like the plot of a book. Everything depends upon the previous chapter. The
Yep,
information that you got on page 12 is going to be important on page 203.
exactly.
And life is like that too.
Because she can't know what she doesn't know yet.
Yeah.
And that's the lovely part about her process, and her own magical thinking, and thinking that she can fix this and figuring out some way to solve her problems. But at the same time, you bring in the Sophie character, her best friend, uh, because I love how it starts off with two Sophies, that they both have the same name, and
Yeah.
they're best friends. It's her best
Yeah.
friend, and and you get a chance to go back into her life. You get into the elder Sophie's life, and her life in Poland, and what happened when she was a child, and the Nazi occupation, and this that was very Anne Frankish, as it happened, and it happened so much, which is an expanding way to open a young adult's uh, understanding. Mine too. I mean, I have such a hard time. I know that your literature is technically young adult. I was there every single page of every single step of the way. There was no writing down in any way that I get in any of your books.
Interesting. Thank you for that. I hope that that's true. I certainly try to make that be true. Um, Back to the stories that
Please,
I'm going to call them old Sophie and young Sophie just to
please,
differentiate.
thank you.
And to explain the odd title of the book, young Sophie, in her attempt to deal with what she begins to acknowledge as a problem for old Sophie, she gets a copy of the Merck Manual, which is a handbook that all doctors have. And I
Mhm.
just took it out of our bookcase because I live with a retired doctor. And there are the testing procedures for someone suffering from cognitive impairment. And so she figures that she can teach old Sophie how to pass this test that she's going to have to take. And as many of us know, and I do because I've been subjected to it, when you enter the doctor's office after a certain age, they'll tell you, I'm going to say 3 words, and I want you to remember them because I'm going to ask you to repeat them at the end of our visit. And I have found a way, because of my particular method of memory, I can ace that test, because the instant somebody says those 3 words to me, I create a picture and a story instantly in my mind with that word in it. And more than that, no, I find a way of putting all 3 words into the same picture and story. So if you said 3 words, truck, desk, green to me, I would immediately picture a green pickup truck with a desk sitting in its back waiting to be transported somewhere. And I would remember those 3 words, green desk truck. So, at any rate, so young Sophie is testing her friend and doing the 3 word part of the test. And her friend flunks it several times. She keeps
Yes.
giving her new chances to try it again. And on the last try, she tells her friend, old Sophie, this time when I say the words, I want you to to do what I just described my doing. And so, and the words then are tree, table, and book. And old Sophie then recounts what those three words have brought to her mind and her memory. And in so doing, then gives this her own history to this child who hasn't known it, and who, in fact, old Sophie tells her, I've never told anybody these stories, not even my own son. And I know there are Holocaust survivors who have not done so, because I've met some, who cannot tell their personal story to their children, but who have told it now to their grandchildren. And so that's what this woman does. And so this book then becomes part of an important element of literature that's out there in the world, constituting literature about the Holocaust. But it does so on a child's level. It doesn't deal with atrocities. And I did that once with a previous book, Number the Stars, which tells the story of what happened in Denmark in 1943. And that book is used often in fourth and fifth grades because classrooms, I don't know if this will always be true given the uproar in the education system now, but classrooms have to, schools, educational systems have to teach children about the Holocaust. It's a part of history, and it's a painful part of history. So teachers have expressed to me that they're grateful to be able to introduce this very difficult subject in a way that eases children at a certain age into it. And I believe this book, Tree Table Book, will do the same thing, as it tells the story that's old Sophie tells to her young friend.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we end up, I love Sophie's learning to see what her place is as a very, as a, an, young Sophie is a standout child. She is her own. I mean, when she puts on her glasses, she has these wonderful glasses that she puts on, and she wants to be. She obviously is not someone who is attempting to conform and fit in and whatever. And so she's going to have her own. And so I'm trying to imagine her suddenly going into puberty and trying to deal and how she would deal with that. I would love to know more about her. Do you ever think about your characters, how they are as they continue to grow in their lives and what they're doing?
I do think about them. And back to Anastasia for a second.
Yeah,
I think I said there were 7, maybe it was even 9 books about her, and she began at age 10, and those books conclude when she's 13. And over the years, and they concluded a long time ago, over the years, I've often had letters from young people who say, Anastasia would be a grown-up now. What is she like? What is she doing? So I've made up various scenarios. I've had her marry a Chinese scientist, and I've had her become a librarian. And there are all kinds of things. But this one, I hadn't really thought about her as a grown-up. I've been so concentrated on young Sophie as a kid going
yeah.
through what she's going through. Uh, you
But
said
you
something.
had her. So the thing is that for you to capture and to put on paper an 11-year-old that is so real. That was, I mean, her voice and the places of her absolute certainty about things. Because at 11, you're certain.
Yes, yeah,
I know
yeah,
exactly how the world works. I've
yeah,
already decided
yeah,
it, and then
yeah.
still to have to learn each time what when something isn't the way she is, and then to be able to then drop
And
that into the
she adjusts. Yeah, she
yeah
sorts it out as she goes along. It's such fun to do that as the creator of her. She begins to feel very real to me,
yeah
even
me
as I
too.
said, I'm the creator of her. I also think, well, no, she's out there on her own. But I did put her together in the beginning, and then she sort of in the writing of any character, once I create them, they seem to move out on their own, and I follow along, recording what they're doing and what they're saying. But they
Yeah.
take on a life of their own, which is kind of fun for me as the author.
When you create and when you're writing, I always wonder, where the next word comes into my brain and how it is and how ideas both have a life of their own and these characters. So when you're in the middle of writing a book, does it begin to take on a life of its own and begin to drive itself? Could you talk a little bit about your creative process for us
Well,
who want to
well,
know how you work?
there are authors I know of, and some I know personally, who are very well organized. And when they sit down to write a book, they may even have index cards, and they know they have an outline, if in their mind, if not on
Sure.
paper. I find that I can't do that. I mean, I can do that. I know how to do that. But if I do that, so much mental energy goes into the creation of that outline or those index cards, if I use such things, that when I sit down to write the story itself, it's all gone and I'm bored with it and I don't want to, I lose interest. So for me to maintain a vibrant interest in what I'm doing, I need to surprise myself each day. And so I start out with a character. In this case, I started out knowing the two characters, and I know a lot about them. In fact, when they come to me in my imagination, and this is almost always true, they come with a name, and I don't have to sit dreaming up a name. They sort of appear and they have a name attached to them. And so I write them down and I try to begin their story, even though I don't know their story yet. I try to begin in a way that shows the reader who this book is about. Here is this character, uh, and with a hint that something is not quite right.
Yeah.
That's what propels the story. Something needs to be fixed. Early on, you know that the child has this friend. The friend has a problem. The child is going to try to fix the problem. But in other books, it may take a different form. But always at the beginning, you know something is slightly amiss. And that's why the reader turns the pages to find out what's wrong here and is it going to be fixed. And I guess there are books, well, like this one, in which no, she can't fix the problem, but
No,
she can learn to live with the problem. Life
which
is
is
going to
what
go on.
life is about, isn't it? I mean, we have so much about life is acceptance.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and I also love is that you teach storytelling in this book because
yeah,
she has to learn what is the basic story. If we're going to
yeah,
tell a story, what do we have to do? What is the problem? What is a problem that needs to be solved? Here's
yeah,
a day. What is going to be different this day? What is the
yeah,
basic plot?
yeah.
I love it because it just brings me right there.
And you originally, in asking this question, asked me to kind of let you know what my process is. And so I
Yeah.
described sitting down and writing that beginning. But at the beginning, I don't know what the end is going to be. And so each day I sit down again, read what I have written the previous day, and two things happen. One is that either I read it aloud or I hear it aloud inside my head. And I listen for the sound of the language. And in some books, that's more important than others. But in every book, it has an importance. The language needs to flow comfortably. And because sometimes in the past, I have not paid that much attention to it. And then I've been called upon in a group or reading at a bookstore or whatever, start reading a passage from one of my own books. And I find that the audience doesn't know this, that I change just the placement of the words because they sound better a different way. And I like to catch that before I have to change it in public. And so I do that. I go through what I've written the previous day, listening to it in my head or aloud, switching words around to make the cadence work. And in the process of doing that, of course, then I'm rethinking what I wrote the previous day, and it's going to lead in what's going to happen next, which I might not have known when I quit the previous day. I have found it's good to quit when you're right in the middle of something and you do know what the next sentence or next paragraph is going to be, because then it's easier to go back to it. If you quit at a time when you're stuck, then you're not going to want to go back because you know you're going to be still stuck. So I try to quit in the middle of some enthusiasm on my own part. And then I go back to it. And then my imagination takes over and I, plow through the next chapter or paragraphs.
How do you keep your imagination exercised so that it stays fresh and it stays fresh and strong when you go to that imagination gym? Do you have because it's so palpable in your books.
I think the fact that I seem on some level to enter the character, or in this case, two characters. I am inside them. I am feeling their feelings. I'm speaking the words that they speak, and I'm thinking the things that they're thinking. And so even when I close up my computer and go to watch something stupid on television or the news, the horrible news that we're getting lately, or go to a movie, that character is still in me. And I might not be consciously thinking of that, but when I go back the next day, there she is again, or he, if the book is dealing with the boy, and that character, I started to say takes over again, but takes over kind of implies that I've lost control, and that is not the case. I know that I am directing that character, but the character is also directing me, and so together, we're on this journey, and that feeling continues and that energy continues. It doesn't seem to lapse, even though I'm off leading a regular life. Yesterday, every Thursday afternoon, I play bridge with a bunch of women. I mean, that's a very ordinary thing to do, and I'm not thinking about what book I'm working on, even though I am working on one. But it's there, and when I open it up the next day, it will still be there, and I'll forget the bridge game, but the book will still be there.
Exactly. I thank you for giving me another opportunity to sit down and to talk about your latest work. Is there a new one sitting that
There
you're?
is a new one sitting in my computer, and I've been working on it for quite a long time, and it's a complicated book. And because of our current political situation, which concerns me, of course, as it does everybody, there's a certain political element has entered the book, and that makes it more complicated. and
Right.
and then I shouldn't worry about this kind of thing, and I don't really worry about it, but it's there in my mind. Will a publisher publish this?
Yeah.
When I finish this book that has political implications, will a publisher be scared to publish it because of
Right.
that? But I can't let that govern what I do if I'm feeling what I do matters. So
Yes.
I'm still working on it.
Thank you. Thank you, Lois. May we continue these conversations because I so
Yeah.
want to continue.
I very much enjoy talking with you, Dennis, and having our, what are they called now?
Reasonably
Reasonably
spontaneous
spotty.
conversations.
They actually are more than reasonably. They're entirely spontaneous, and I do enjoy them. And I would love to continue as long as your audience doesn't get sick of listening to me.
Well, I promise you they won't, but I do the same thing with me. I know that if I am engaged, the audience will be engaged because that way we can continue to, I can continue to get a chance to follow you and to follow your creative process, to be absolutely engaged and involved in the world that you're creating because it's the worlds that I've seen, what I have read, there is an aspirational quality to your writing. There is the people. There's a courageousness and a love and a connection and an interest in the people. I love the characters. I love the way that you write, and I deeply enjoy getting a chance to talk with you.
Thank you. I enjoy it too. Let's do it again.